So if I compare these two, first of all, you can see that compared to business as usual, both of these are energy efficient outlooks. In one case, it's more forced in through discontinuity, which of course has security implications. And in the other case, it is more gradual and hence is deeper over time. I like to bring this up because energy efficiency is so important. Energy use will grow, but the growth in demand moderation is something that will be significant. So this is my map of the energy world, moving from the left on energy sources to the right to energy uses. But one of the most prominent aspects of this is recognizing how much energy ends up in waste heat. And so indeed, looking at the power sector and the transport sector, including transport electrification, either through battery electric vehicles or through hydrogen combined with fuel cells, which is another route to electrification, are significant. And clearly, these are two areas in which urbanization development patterns are extremely significant, because it makes a big difference whether you are able to institute combined heat and power, and it makes a big difference if you're able to institute, instead of urban sprawl, tight transport with public mass transport and other resources. Let me point out, because I've often been observed that blueprints, shouldn't we be able to go faster than blueprints? Well, I hope we can go faster than blueprints. But blueprints is already at what we conceive to be the limit at which the underpinning of the system can be changed. You can see here that by 2050, you've got considerable reduction in the use of oil for transport, even though transport is growing massively, increased use of biofuels, and that blue for electricity actually represents 40% of passenger miles by 2050 because of the increased efficiency of electric vehicles. And so we're talking about a world here in which vehicle electrification is a reality in mass markets by 2020. That's very aggressive assumptions. And you can see similarly on 2050 in the power sector, the massive input of other renewable resources in power sector besides the current fossil resources. The implications for climate are here reflected. On the left-hand side in Scramble, you can see a dire outlook. For those of you who know the figures around here, when you project this forward and use the best climate models, and we work with the MIT climate group around this, this is an outlook in which the temperature rise by 2100 is approximately 5.5 degrees C with a 50-50% chance. If we look at blueprints, you can see this much more optimistic pattern. But even here, when you project that forward to 2100, we have got stabilization, but it is at a level of about 650 parts per million CO2 equivalent, 550 parts per million CO2, and hence about a 3 degrees temperature rise. So I just summarize what we've learned over the years of looking at this. First of all, the hard truths of demand, supply, and environment are very hard. And they continue to get harder the less attention is given to them over time. Transition is inevitable. Technology does play a major role, and I've highlighted some of those technologies. I've highlighted biofuels, I've highlighted wind and solar, carbon dioxide capture and storage, natural gas. But there are no single silver bullets. This is a world of and, not either or. Political and regulatory choices are pivotal. In fact, they determine the difference between those two types of outlook. But even more significant is the criticality of the next 5 years. Now let me explain that. One of the factors in the energy system is the natural lifetime of capital infrastructure. You know, if you build a building, it is going to be in place for 50 years. You know, if you build a power station, it's going to be in place for 30 to 40 years. You know, if you buy a new car, it's going to be somewhere on the road in 20 years' time. So the policies that are in place in the next 5 years shape investment for the next 15 years, and that already takes you out to 2050. And so if you look at the next 5 years, we're then talking about a cycle. And we've clearly been through a difficult business cycle recently. And what has come forward from that are things that actually make paying attention to this harder than they were before, and one thing that makes it perhaps easier in terms of taking pressure off the system. First of all, we project that macroeconomic volatility in the coming decade is going to be higher than in the period known as the Great Moderation between 1985 and 2005, and that regulatory uncertainty is increasing as well, whether that's around climate or around finance or other areas. Those things tend to depress demand, depress investment, because of course they increase perceived risk and hence make it less likely to be investing in moving in the right direction. The one bright spot is that unconventional gas developments in North America have impact on the global scene here in Asia as well, because it creates more availability of a relatively low carbon fuel source right now, which is more available than we saw it 3 years ago. So what I would like to do now is just conclude by saying these hard truths are very hard. We are in a situation where we have to determine together what the future will look like, that we have to notice that they have to be handled together, that supply, demand, and environment must be seen as one, and finally, that this will require action that is not only public-private, but across current industry boundaries. I believe that we can have some confidence that this can be done, but at the moment, the world is not moving faster than blueprints, but is moving slower than blueprints. Thank you very much indeed.